Hello, friends. I am here with my mid-month check-in, end of the month check-in, 2-week check-in. I'm here to check in. So these are the things that I've read, finished, DNF'd, or am currently reading. The first thing I want to start off with is Dreams of the Dying, which I spoke about a little in my previous check-in video, and that is by Nicholas Lietzu. I ended up giving this book 2.75 stars. I've rounded up to 3 on Goodreads. I think ultimately this book just really fell flat for me, mostly because of the characters. It started off really great. The concept was so much fun and interesting. The characters were interesting. I was pulled into the idea of him seeing dead people in his dreams, for there being dream walkers, all these things. But I think at the end of the day, the characters just fell flat for me. I didn't feel like their motivations were really distinctive and felt really real to me. It just kind of felt very contrived. I thought that there was a lot of repetitiveness in the middle that maybe didn't need to be there. I really felt like some of the character interactions and relationships just felt fake. They just didn't feel real, just didn't feel plausible. They just didn't feel natural to me. So I ended up really just not loving this as much as I had hoped, like I did at the start. I still think it was a fun, interesting book. I just it didn't live up to my expectations. The next one is one I was listening to an audiobook, and that is Dead Wake by Erik Larson. I did not finish this. I ended up running out of time. I had borrowed it from the library, and circumstances being what they may, I just didn't get as much time in which I was able to listen to it, and so I didn't make much progress. I know that I mentioned that I thought that it was very detailed, very thorough. This is about the Lusitania during World War I. So yeah, it discusses World War I, a lot of the happenings going on in Europe and the Americas, and it just felt pretty dry to me, I thought. And I think that maybe if I had made more progress and moved beyond the initial stages of the book, I really would have enjoyed it. I've heard great things about Erik Larson's writing. I do think that at some point I will continue with it or pick up one of his other books. But yeah, I did not make it through that one. The next book that I read was Coffin Moon by Keith Rossum, and this was such a freaking hit with me. I gave this a 4.5 stars. This was so good. Our main character is a combat vet, and he is working at a bar, and he lives above the bar with his wife and their adopted daughter/niece, and he gets involved with a messy situation with his mother-in-law and this vampire. And this turns into an adventure story, a story of them seeking revenge. I thought it was just so well done. The characters are well written and really well realized. They really felt so real to me. They jumped off the page. I loved the fact that it was dual perspective in actually more than just two, but you got the perspective of your main character, but you also got glimpses from the vampire himself, which I thought was so interesting and really gave it this full, real feeling to it, because every story has two sides, right? And this did that. It portrayed it so well, and I just thought it was so well written and so interesting and so much fun. I highly recommend this book if you're interested in magical realism, vampire type stories. The next thing I read after this was The Fellowship of the Ring by J.R.R. Tolkien. I did a reading vlog for this, so if you're really interested in hearing my thoughts on this story, I would recommend that you go and check that out if you're interested. But I will just say that this was such a freaking wonderful book. I cannot believe that I put it off as long as I did. I really kick myself for that. I had heard people say that it was slow, and I do think that at times it did feel a little bit slow, not without purpose. I do think that the slowness and the overly descriptive nature of the narrative added value to the story and set you in this magical, whimsical world. And you can see the progression of the setting and the characters go from this colorful, magical, happy place and people into this dark and ominous, foreboding situation. And it's really interesting to see the characters make their way through these intense situations. I loved it so much. I really love the way that he explores the nature of good and evil. I love the way he explores the power within smaller people and smaller things, that not people who are in power always need to hold all the power. Yeah, I just thought it was so good, and I cannot wait to get to the Two Towers, which I hope to pick up soon. Next, I picked up, and these next few I have just started, so I'm just going to kind of breeze through them really quickly. Wow, this wrap up is going to be pretty short. But I picked up I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman. This is a dystopian in which there are 40 women being held in this cell underground, and they're under constant guard, and they are not allowed to do certain things. Like, they cannot harm each other, they cannot harm themselves, all these weird things. And from what I understand, there's not a lot of explanation that is ever given. You follow these women as they eventually escape their prison somehow. And that is all I know. I will say that this book seems a little bit harder to read, only because the chapters are longer. There's not a lot of dialogue. You're really just kind of trying to figure out what the heck is going on. So I think, 30, 40 pages in, and I think it's a 200-page book. So the next book I picked up was Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. I'm like 50 pages in. But I will say that I adore Schwab's writing. I think that she is such a lyrical writer. Her prose is just so magnificent, and it just really catches me and pulls me in, and I just want to devour it. I will say that so far the two perspectives that I have read very differently. The very first perspective you get is a woman back in the 1500s, and you're experiencing her life as she's trying to craft it into something that she desires and bend it in her way. And the next perspective you get is one that is more modern. It's 2019, I believe. And the narrative there is so different from the very first character that you get. It's night and day. And it really speaks to the way the world is today, how we kind of move through it in such a fast-paced motion. Everything's kind of a blur. Like, there's just so much information you take in at once, whether that be, your phone, your computer, the people around you. Like, it's just kind of a nonstop information overload. And that's kind of how the second perspective reads to me. This girl obviously must have like ADD or something. So yeah, it's been really interesting. And from what I understand, this is a vampire story. And I do think that reading the second perspective, I have just met the vampire. I'm not sure yet, but we shall see. I'm really, really enjoying it. I hope to and I'm reading this in actual hardback, so I have a little bit less time to make my way through that than some of the other ones. But really enjoying it. I hope to put a big dent in it, maybe tonight and this weekend. The next book I picked up on Kindle Unlimited, and this is book 2 in a series. It is called The Exorcist House Genesis. So I read The Exorcist House like a year and a half, 2 years ago. It's by Nick Roberts, and I really, really enjoyed it. I think I read this in my Trying to Find Horror Books That Are Actually Scary series of videos, and this one really worked for me. I thought it was so good. The humor in it was great. The scary scenes were super scary. He put some obvious nods to like The Exorcist and some of those classic horror books. And this is kind of going along in that same vein. It picks up similarly. It picks up in the same kind of vein as the other one. You're following You have like a prequel storyline, and then you have the same family that has now moved out of this house, this haunted, demonic place. They kind of get drawn back into the house again, it seems. Again, I'm like 60 pages into this 300-page book, and already there have been not even nods, like straight up talk about the Amityville horror story. So I love seeing that. I love the way he takes inspiration from classically good horror stories and includes them in the book and pays them homage. And yeah, I think he's a really great horror writer. Do I think that it is going to win a literary award? No. But are you looking for that generally when you pick up a horror story? No, you're looking for something that is scary, that has a decent storyline, that keeps you captivated, that is somewhat believable, because is it even scary if it's so far-fetched that you can't even believe it or wrap your brain around it? I personally don't think so. It is the element of basis in reality that makes something scary. And this one, or at least the previous book, it totally did that. Highly recommend Nick Roberts if you haven't read from him before. He's a great writer, and his books are on Kindle Unlimited. Anyway, that is what I have been reading lately. I would love to hear if you had read any of these books, what you thought, or if you're reading anything great and you want to share it and send it my way. I always appreciate your input, and thanks for watching, guys. Till next time. Bye!